Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. I wanted to provide this video so that you have some familiarity with how to get started with essay number 1. So what I plan to do with this particular video is to provide some insight into the brainstorming process and how you might actually go about gathering the information that you need and understanding what to do with that information, as well as finding ways in order to integrate the information or the source material that you found. Now, it's important to make sure that you understand what you're supposed to do for essay 1 and what's required, so be sure to go back and watch those videos. The live stream also provides a little bit of information, or the recorded live stream, provides a little bit of information about explaining what you might do. So just quickly, a short recap without getting into too much detail. For this particular essay, you are required to pick a specific subject, and once you pick that particular subject that you wish to explore perceptions about, you're sort of going to make decisions along the way about the direction in which this paper is going to go. So, for example, this video is going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to walk you through that as if I were writing the paper. Of course, it's going to differ depending on the decisions you make about your particular topic or subject for that matter. Remember that this isn't necessarily an argumentative paper. This isn't necessarily to present statistics or information or anything of that nature. Our job for this essay is to present perceptions and then draw conclusions about those perceptions. Now, whose perceptions those are entirely up to you. You want to keep in mind what you're wanting to discover through this process, as well as through your discovery process, what do you want to communicate about that exploration to your readers. So this video is going to give that, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with, of course, a popular choice. Now, again, you might not think that, as you see here, the documentary about Britney Spears, framing Britney Spears, might not be academic, but in reality it is, because it addresses a notion of legal matters, rights, things like that, as it relates to a person's civil liberties. And then, of course, you can examine plenty of things, the relationships between people, of course, father and daughter, and many other aspects that you might discover along the way. Remember that as you begin, you may not have the answers right now, and in fact, you don't necessarily want to. And if you're like me and most human beings who will naturally draw conclusions about what they think or things that they've heard about this, or if you watched it yourself, which is often a good idea, that you draw your own conclusions and you have your own perceptions about it. Now, remember that many things are going to be brought up in the video, so it may not necessarily be perceptions about the entire documentary per se. It could just very well be maybe one aspect of it that was presented, and so you can make this as big as you want or as specific as you want. It's entirely up to you. So, of course, this is where I begin, and if you watch the developing topics for writing video, I address this notion of observation. Where do I begin? How do I pick something? And so for me, this particular documentary was important. Of course, a lot of people are talking about it. So in my mind, I'm like, great, there's going to be tons of information to gather perspectives about this one thing. Remember that it's not necessarily perspectives about Britney Spears herself, although you can do that. You'll just have to frame your writing in that way. But I want to talk about perspectives of the documentary, or perhaps maybe discover elements in that documentary that people are providing perceptions about. The next step, of course, is to decide how you want to go about this. If you are going to just simply gather other people's perspectives and not include your own, that's one way to do that. That means you are just going to be a kind of a reporter / researcher, where you're going to go out and get people's perspectives. This is going to be the integrated quotes that you're going to be using in your essay. Remember, because we're looking at perceptions, you're not going to be looking at statistics, because numbers don't give us perceptions exactly. They could lead us into the direction of perceptions, but we want to see how people see things, right? So they're going to communicate that by speaking about it. Now, I'll get to that point in just a moment, but again, think about if you want to participate in this. So if you have your own perspectives and you want to include it, figure out why you want to include your own perspectives, because that's going to equally matter. Are you just trying to speak out on it because you have something to say, or are you going to speak out on it because maybe something resonated with you, or there was some sort of connection to it? Remember, we're wanting to kind of have a reason as to why we decided to privilege the voices that we include in this paper. So it's not just picking random quotes. You have to kind of decide which way you're going to focus. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and basically you're going to get a sneak peek about what's going on in my brain. Now, naturally, of course, this is a messy process, so it's not going to be linear by any means, in that you kind of have to have maybe multiple documents open and putting things together. So this video is just going to focus on that part of getting and gathering your information, and then I am going to provide another video for next week that's going to talk about, okay, now that I have my information, how am I going to develop my writing and develop my essay? So that'll be for next week. So right now I have, of course, my topic, or the thing that I wish to look at. So my topic / subject, is going to be Spears documentary. Okay. Now, one of the things that I would actually recommend is sort of get some insight as to, and at least type out why, what's my reason. And here in this case, it could be pretty much anything. Of course, she's a celebrity, but not just anyone. We witnessed, I might probably older than most of you, but we witnessed a lot of treatment in the media of Britney Spears. So, we can talk about that. Treatment of her by media. We can also talk about perhaps maybe what you've observed about her and her music, so your own observations. And I'm not going to type those here, but these are just insights for you. And if you follow her on Instagram, that could be something that you observe. So maybe current observations that you have about her. So, you may address all of these things or you may not, but this is going to be something that's going to be catered toward your thesis later. So it's going to be important for you to watch the thesis video to understand how this might work, because we're looking for key terms here. And as I said before, one of the things that you want to think about as far as writing is concerned is that everything is flexible and in motion, okay? That right now you're not expected to write the thesis in full, or, right now you're not expected to write the introduction. This is the process that I take, that I'm not just sitting here writing an introduction and getting started and then hope my ideas fall together. That would be a very miserable way of writing. So if you do that, kudos to you, but I have too much anxiety for that. So I need to have content first and then transfer that content into writing. So this is what that process is going to look like. So the why is going to connect to my thesis statement later on when it's time for me to write that, okay? So now I know that I need to gain perspective. So my next point is, which ones, right? So I am going to go do some research. So, the term research kind of gets a little iffy along the way in the sense of what does research mean? Well, research means a lot of different things. It just depends on what you're looking for, right? What are you trying to explore? So because I know I'm not writing a full-fledged argumentative essay, I don't necessarily need those scholarly sources that, a lot of times we've been told we need to go get those scholarly sources. Right now, what we'll need is some primary sources. So primary sources are sources that are firsthand accounts of a situation or event. So maybe somebody's speaking about their experience because they observed or witnessed something or experienced something. And in this instance, because I'm looking for people's perspectives, the primary source is going to be quotes that come directly from the person speaking. It's that simple for this essay. So I don't necessarily need to go find articles or anything like that. However, I can use articles to help me in the direction to find the information that I need. So I have this article from CBS News, okay? And I might not necessarily use this article per se, but it is going to be helpful for me because what it does is provide perspectives directly from people themselves. So if you go ahead and read this about, the documentary about Britney Spears, made headlines, of course. And then, of course, it's addressing what people said, their perspectives about this particular movement. So you can see here that right away they begin to introduce those perspectives. So after watching the documentary, some Twitter users said they were uncomfortable, angry, and then an actress, Valerie Bertolini, called the documentary a gut punch. So one thing that you'll want to do, and remember that articles are going to take snippets. So I would say go to the source. They give you the hyperlink to go to it to analyze it yourself. So for instance, I would say, you know what? It might be a good idea to get perspectives of celebrities because they've been through that experience. So I think I'm going to decide on celebrity perspectives only. I don't want the general population, although it would be interesting to see, but celebrities might be good because they can identify with her or maybe they have insight. And so it might be very telling about what they say about the documentary and give us insight, right, into the celebrity culture, if you will, using this particular documentary to do that. Now, so celebrities can be one of those things, and you could use multiple celebrities' perspectives, right? So I'm going to go through here, and I'd probably click on it and just kind of see if she says more things that follow. So we have a list, of course, and you have to make sense of all of this, right? So if you have this information, she says, makes me crazy, grateful for my parents, how they protected me as a young girl in this insane business. Okay. So we have a little bit of perspective or insight. Of course, she's making commentary about the parents. Okay, so clearly the parental aspect of the video was something that identified with her. Now you have to decide, is this something that you want to include? So my recommendation to you would be to gather different perspectives from different celebrities. So one of the things that, and since you're working with Twitter and it's kind of very hard to see. So I'm actually, and this would 100% would be what I would do, is to actually just snip their tweets, right? Because I'm going to say, all right, so that's one that I may potentially use. So I'm going to open up a new document. Okay. And so I'm going to just put all of my, all of the tweets that I think I may use. Now, remember, you don't know if you're going to use it yet or not because you haven't gathered all of them, right? So I would just say, you know what? I'm going to put them over here. I may or may not use it, but I'm just going to collect a bunch of different ones, okay? And then decide from there. So where are some other celebrities? Okay, I'm going to scroll down some more. They have Casey Musgraves tweeted it out, so I would go to her page here. She has her, so I'd probably snip that one too. Again, I'm not ready to analyze just yet, right? Oops. I'm not ready to analyze just yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and then figure it out later because I'm not at that point where I want to begin that process of analysis, for instance, okay? So I continue just putting more, and I would just continue doing this, right? So going to the different celebrity pages. It doesn't matter who, unless you specifically want to look at celebrities. Maybe you want to look at specific singers who might have kind of grew up with her at the same time period. It's entirely up to you. Remember that the choices you make will provide you a different kind of paper and provide different kind of insight. So if you did decide to only look at perspectives of musicians who were her same age or grew up during that same era, if they exist, it might be a good idea to look to see if they're making commentary on it. But if you can't find anything, you're not stuck. Just scale back and say, okay, well, I couldn't find anybody else talking about it, so let me just generalize it to broader celebrities. And so we have here that her boyfriend provided his perspective, and that might be a key role, of course. It's quoted here. Now, it's not hyperlinked, so it's probably not something we can cite, but they got it from somewhere, so you could probably cite this article that provides that, so you'll need it. So I would probably just, copy this, and then as I'm going through, got 1 second, I'm going to have to cite this because it's not like it's a Twitter handle. The Twitter I can easily cite without having to go back. But what I want to do is if I end up deciding to use it, of course, I'm going to want to know where it came from. So I'm just going to post the link after it and, for my citations later. So this page here, I'm going to just simply do that. I'm going to go out, find the celebrity perspectives. These are all primary sources because we have the direct quotations coming from the people themselves. Okay. Now, you can continue on. There's more here. Again, actress Amber Tamblyn tweeted, "Framing Britney was a rough watch, much like the Winehouse documentary, only we know how that story ended. I hope Britney is freed and liberated." So once we gather as much as possible, then we want to begin the process, of course, of organizing our ideas. So we decided that we're going to look at celebrity perspectives and gain, of course you have to have a minimum of 2, but I want to have quite a few. Okay. I would recommend that you have a variety of perspectives so that way we can get some insight into how people are seeing this situation. Okay. Another option, of course, is to perhaps maybe get a psychologist perspective. So you could only focus on celebrities if you want and then get tons of them. That will meet the requirements of the paper. Or if you wish to maybe get parents' perspectives, maybe you wish to get, like I said, psychological perspectives. Okay. So this person claims they are a psychiatrist, and so they've never seen a case where someone was appointed a conservator guardian unless they met one of the criteria. And in this case, again, you want to decide whether it actually gives a perspective. They're probably giving more information than anything else, so that doesn't really give us perspectives, right? So you'll want to perhaps maybe find something similar to this in the sense that if the person self-identifies as a psychiatrist, then you can go ahead and determine whether or not they're actually giving perspectives about the documentary. While this one doesn't necessarily do that directly, so be careful not to interpret that as a perspective. This is more just information than anything else, okay? But this is a possibility in case. Oops. You can do parents because it's about a parental relationship. Okay. And then if you have any other ideas, maybe from a legal perspective, maybe some lawyers are going to give some insight about how they see the situation from a legal perspective. So it's your choice. Again, what would you like to present to your readers at that point? Okay. So then you're going to move on to your direct quotation. So now we get to a point where we have to, decide which ones we're going to use. And this is the part where analysis kind of comes in, right? So what I always say to people when they decide about using source material, it's not just, oh, look, I found a bunch of different ones. It's really analyzing what it is that they say. And this is going to be important because in part 3 of your essay, the analysis part, this is where you're going to give your commentary about the information you presented, about the choices you made, or about the direct quotations you decided to include, right? So we know we have a bunch of different ones out there, but you made a conscious choice to choose those particular direct quotations, and your audience wants to know why. What was significant? What was important about them, right? So in this case of Valerie Bertolini, the way she sees it is she really focuses on the notion of men, right? She doesn't really address any female or anything like that. So in her eyes, or from her perspective, she believes, or she perceives anyway, that this is a male issue, that men in her life are taking advantage of her. And she gives a list, and that becomes clear. Now, let's say that some of the other celebrities kind of allude to that, right? Maybe they talk about how the male or the dad or whatever. And so what you could then do is now organize it by that theme. So for instance, I might now say, oh, you know what? I found that other people are saying male stuff. So I'm going to organize it this way. Okay, and that's going to be Valerie's quote. And I have it over here. Normally I would, if it was not in this image, of course I would copy and paste it. So I would have the direct quotation. So that would be my first one. Okay, so another one would be Fortune Feimster, who is a comedian celebrity. So here she says, I watched a New York Times documentary on Britney Spears, and it's so messed up that they aren't letting this very successful adult woman be in charge of her life. She made it very clear she does not want her dad to have any part of it. So in this aspect, you can determine whether or not this relates to this theme of men taking advantage. Now, she does address this idea of an adult woman being in charge. Now, we can't necessarily conclude that she feels this is a male taking advantage of women issue. So you want to be cautious not to force that analysis if it's not really there. She doesn't really blame men in this aspect. So it's really more about her talking and addressing that this idea of taking power away in general, right, from an adult, where we know adults should have their own power. So I'm going to say and label it power issue, right? So here is another theme. It's going to be Fortune's quote. Okay. So this is kind of what I would do throughout, right? And I would organize myself in this way. This is going to matter, okay? These keywords are going to matter when it comes to writing your topic sentences for your body paragraphs. In the next video, I'm going to be using the same information and showing you how you will develop your body paragraphs using some of the key terms that you have here, as well as the direct quotations and how to integrate them. So at this point, this is really what you want to do in stage 1 of the drafting process, okay? So you really want to organize your themes or patterns that you're noticing, and it's going to be very, very important for you to do that and organize those thoughts and ideas that are presented in the direct quotations, as I said before, because then it will be easier to transfer it over into the body paragraphs. We don't know how that will look just yet, but as long as you have the information available to you, then it will be that much easier. So for this stage, as I remind you, this should be your brainstorming process, and you'll notice that it takes a little bit of time to do that. You know, luckily for me, I found that article related to the Britney Spears documentary that provided a lot of direct links. Great. If you find those, that's okay. It's not called cheating. It's called being efficient at your research. So now remember that the perspectives don't necessarily have to come from people, Twitter, or whatever, depending on who you decide. So if let's say, for example, you wanted to gain Generation Z's perspective about something, And if you are classified under Generation Z, I'm sure you know a lot of people who are, and it becomes that much easier for you to just directly ask people or to ask them questions or whatever. So depending on how or who you want to ask, that process could either be a little bit more challenging or easier depending on what you're trying to gather. Now, remember with this, we want primary sources, so be very careful of finding articles or scholarly work that presents numbers and information and things like that, because they don't really tell us necessarily the perspectives. We want to try to understand it for ourselves. So the way in which we analyze these words here, okay, tells us something very different. So they're all three of these people and more, her boyfriend, are all talking about it and providing their perspectives, but in very different ways. This is the essence of the perspectives essay, is we want to explore how people see one thing, right? We all are looking at it, we are all observing it, listening to it, and we're all processing it very differently, right? And so this is your job to go out there and to gather that information. You'll notice that we're not really necessarily making arguments about anything yet. Okay, so I will talk about part 3 in another video. This is going to be your analysis conclusion part, and you'll get better insight. But for now, I want you to focus on just the brainstorming element. I honestly recommend you see how messy this process is. Do what you need to do to organize yourself in the sense of gathering your materials and saving it, because to try to remember all this in your brain and then quickly write a last minute paper is not going to work out for you, okay? If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Please stay tuned for parts 2 and 3. Those will be posted on for next week. And they're going to be a little bit different than the modules, again, because these are sort of these pop-up videos that are going to be helpful in replacing the live session, which I couldn't attend. And I, again, encourage you to watch the videos of developing intros, developing body paragraphs, and developing conclusions, because I'm going to be referring to those videos quite a bit, and it'll help you to understand. So much like this information talks a little bit about developing ideas and topics for writing, next week is going to focus on developing the body paragraphs, intro and conclusion for Essay 1 specifically.